The savannah was unnervingly quiet, as if the entire landscape had paused, holding its breath. The distant, occasional call of a bird echoed faintly, but the air around them was thick with silence, something different from the usual rhythm of life in the wild. The rangers, moving through the tall, dry grass, paused instinctively, their trained eyes scanning the vast expanse before them. In the distance, through the swaying golden blades, a form lay motionless. It was a sight that should not have been, especially in a land that pulsed with life. A lion, its powerful body spread out awkwardly against the earth, its sides rising and falling in shallow, strained breaths. The man's heart skipped as he recognized the animal, a lion, but not the mighty figure it should have been. This lion was broken. The man's chest tightened as he approached, his eyes narrowing as he observed the stillness of the creature. Lions, so often synonymous with strength and dominance, were not meant to be so vulnerable. But here it was, a living paradox. Its golden fur, once radiant under the sun, was matted with dark stains, blood streaking its body, a sharp contrast to the vast, dry landscape. The injury wasn't immediately clear, but it was apparent that something had rendered this mighty predator defenseless. The lion's head lay heavy on the ground, its eyes dull with exhaustion. The usual sharpness in its gaze was gone, replaced by confusion and fatigue. The lion's body trembled slightly, its breathing a soft, labored sound that broke the silence around them. The rangers moved closer, their feet barely making a sound on the dry earth, each step deliberate and slow. There was no sign of a pack, no other lions in sight, just this solitary, vulnerable creature. In the wild, such isolation was a death sentence. The man felt the weight of that truth settle in his chest as he crouched down, careful not to startle the lion. The air was thick with tension, the weight of the moment pressing on him. The lion, though clearly aware of their presence, made no move to defend itself. Its eyes flickered briefly toward them, but there was no aggression, no defensive posture. It was too weak to fight, too injured to run. The rangers exchanged a look, their expressions somber. They had encountered injured animals before, but this felt different. The lion was not just wounded, it was utterly broken, its power stripped away by whatever had caused this. The man's breath was steady, but his heart raced as he assessed the lion's condition. He could see the injury now. The lion's leg was badly torn, deep gashes in its flesh. The man's fingers twitched with the urge to move in quickly to help. But he knew better than to rush in. This lion was a wild animal, still capable of reacting fiercely even in its weakened state. A sudden move could make things worse. He leaned closer, his body low to the ground to avoid alarming the lion. The air felt thick with the scent of dust, and the faint breeze shifted the grasses around them, offering a brief distraction. The lion's breath was still shallow, each inhale a painful effort. The man could feel the tension in the air, the heavy silence of an animal caught between life and death, surrounded by a vast and indifferent wilderness. The man exchanged another look with his fellow ranger, his eyes silently asking the question they both knew they had to answer. Should they try to help, or would it be better to let nature take its course? They stood in the balance of life and death, the decision pressing on them both. They knew that even with the best of intentions, they could do nothing to undo the lion's pain completely. It would take more than they had with them to heal this kind of injury. Still, leaving the lion to suffer alone seemed unthinkable. They stood in silence, only the faint sound of the lion's breathing filling the air, waiting for the next step to become clear. The savannah stretched endlessly around them, indifferent to the fragile lives it carried. The man felt the gravity of the moment. They were not merely witnessing an injured lion, they were stepping into a story of survival, of fragility, of life clinging to the last threads of existence. The weight of the lion's gaze held him still, and for a moment everything else fell away. It was just him, his companions, and the animal that lay before them, waiting for a decision to be made. The stillness around them was broken only by the soft, rhythmic breath of the injured lion. The rangers had moved in cautiously, their steps slow and deliberate, mindful not to startle the animal. Yet there was an urgency in their movements, a quiet tension that underscored their every action. The lion, though severely injured, was not completely docile. Its body was weakened, but its strength remained a force to be reckoned with. The rangers understood this delicate balance. They could not afford to underestimate the danger, even in the lion's compromised state. Every movement they made was careful as they worked to assess the injury, their actions fluid but restrained. There was no room for error here, no margin for rash decisions. The wound was deep, but not as fatal as they had feared at first. It seemed as though the lion had been struck by something sharp, perhaps a predator's claws or a jagged object in the wild. It was a blow that had nearly incapacitated it, but it wasn't immediately life-threatening. Still, the injury was too severe to treat in the field with the tools they had at hand. Moving the lion was risky. Its pain, its distress, the unpredictability of its response, all of these factors made the situation more delicate. But the rangers knew that if they did nothing, the lion would certainly die. Their decision was clear, though fraught with tension. They would try to move the lion, to treat the wound, but they had to proceed with caution, knowing full well the dangers of aggravating an already perilous situation. As the rangers began to prepare their supplies, a sudden rustle in the distance sliced through the heavy silence. The wind shifted, and the grass stirred, as if the savannah itself was holding its breath. A branch snapped somewhere off to the side, the sound sharp and unmistakable. The rangers froze, their senses heightened, eyes narrowing as they scanned the horizon. The lion, still breathing heavily on the ground, remained motionless, its focus entirely inward as it battled the pain. But the rangers could feel it. Something else was out there, something far more dangerous than the injured lion before them. The rangers exchanged a glance, and in that brief moment, a silent understanding passed between them. The atmosphere had shifted, thickening with the weight of the unknown. They could feel the presence of something watching, waiting. The rustling grew louder, closer, until the unmistakable form of a predator emerged from the tall reeds. A large male lion, its mane full and imposing, appeared at the edge of the clearing. The rangers' eyes locked onto the approaching figure, each of them instinctively holding their breath. The male lion moved with purpose, its steps measured and deliberate, its eyes fixed on the injured lion. It was silent, as if every part of its being was honed for the task at hand. The air grew colder, the tension palpable. The rangers' hearts pounded in their chests as they watched the male lion advance. This was not a curious wanderer. This was a dominant creature, driven by instinct and territoriality. The rangers had known the savannah was filled with danger, but this was different. a primal threat, a living embodiment of the raw power of nature. The male lion was no mere observer. It was a force to be reckoned with, and the rangers had only moments to act. The injured lion, still lying on the ground, did not seem to notice the approaching danger. Its breathing was shallow and labored, its body too weak to react to the threat closing in. The male lion, sensing the vulnerability of its kin, continued to move closer. It was territorial, its instincts driving it forward, aware that this was an easy target. The rangers, now fully aware of the situation, sprang into action, moving quickly but with precision. They could not afford to make a mistake, not with the male lion so close. They had to protect the injured lion, but they also had to keep their distance from the dominant male, whose every movement was filled with the promise of violence. The rangers' minds raced, but their actions remained calm. They knew the stakes were high, and one wrong move could send the situation spiraling. The male lion, still advancing, radiated power, its muscles taut, its focus unwavering. It was a predator at its peak, and the rangers were acutely aware of how little time they had. The jungle around them seemed to close in, the hum of life fading into a quiet, almost suffocating silence. The rangers were caught in a delicate balance, protecting the injured lion without provoking the male, all while knowing that the jungle's rhythm, dictated by survival, could change at any moment. The tension was thick, the weight of the choice inescapable. The male lion, now just yards away from the wounded lion, lowered its head, a deep, rumbling growl emanating from its chest. The rangers stood frozen, each movement deliberate and calculated. Their hands instinctively reached for their equipment, knowing the moment of truth was upon them. The tension in the air was palpable, the weight of the situation pressing in around them. The male lion's muscles tensed, its large body coiling, ready to spring into action, its gaze fixed on the injured lion, still and vulnerable on the ground, its chest heaving with shallow breaths. The intent was clear. This lion had found its prey, and it would not hesitate to strike. But just as the male lion lunged forward, its powerful body surging with the rush of the hunt, something unexpected happened. The roar that had filled the air abruptly stopped, replaced by a sound that could not have been anticipated, a low, desperate cry from the wounded lion. It was not the usual defiance of an animal protecting its territory, nor the deep growl of a lion preparing for battle. No, this cry was one of utter helplessness, a sound that carried pain and fear, and the unmistakable plea for mercy. The shift in the atmosphere was immediate and undeniable. The male lion, poised to strike, paused in mid-charge. Its muscles twitched with the lingering anticipation of its attack, but its focus shifted, its gaze wavered. The desperation in the cry had pierced through its instincts, and for the briefest of moments the male lion seemed confused, uncertain. Its intense stare, once fixed on the fallen lion, now flicked away, its posture loosening as the charge slowed to a halt. It was as if the weight of the situation, the primal bond between kin, had subtly altered the lion's intent. The rangers, ever watchful, recognized the change, sensing that this was the opening they had been waiting for. With swift, calculated movements, the rangers seized the moment, their presence subtle but decisive. They knew this was their chance to intervene, to help the injured lion before the male lion regained its focus. The man, heart-pounding, moved toward the wounded animal, his gaze never straying from the large predator nearby. Every step was measured, his approach quiet but urgent. He knew well the risks. One misstep, one sudden movement, and everything could shift in an instant. The male lion, still watching but no longer acting with the same aggression, began to retreat. It took a few slow steps backward, its focus now drifting, its once fixed stare wandering off into the distance. Perhaps something had caught its attention, an unfamiliar sound, a distant call, but it was enough to break its concentration. The wounded lion, for the first time in what felt like an eternity, was spared. The rangers moved quickly but carefully, tending to the lion's injuries with practiced hands, ensuring that they didn't push too hard or too fast. Time was of the essence, but so was caution. The male lion, still lingering in the distance, no longer felt like an immediate threat. Its presence remained heavy, but the danger had ebbed, and with it, the tension that had filled the air moments before began to dissipate. The rangers worked in near silence, their focus on the injured lion as they stabilized its condition, the jungle around them holding its breath. It was a moment of fragile reprieve, one that had come only through a delicate understanding of the situation, a precise reading of the lion's behavior. As the rangers continued their work, they knew the danger was far from over. The male lion, though seemingly distracted, still held the jungle in its grip. The tension lingered, but for the moment, survival had been claimed through patience and an understanding of the natural order. In the stillness of the jungle, a quiet sense of victory settled, not in the form of triumph, but in the calm acknowledgement that this precarious balance had been navigated. It was a small victory in the larger, untamed rhythm of the wild, a fleeting moment where human intervention had woven its way into the cycle of life and death. The injured lion's breathing had steadied, though it remained shallow and weak. The rangers, working with careful precision, had managed to secure its leg, and the flow of blood had slowed, but they knew the real challenge lay ahead. Stabilizing the lion was only the first step. The risks of moving an injured animal through the dense jungle, with its countless hidden dangers, were immense. Every decision carried weight, and the need for urgency was tempered by the understanding that one wrong move could undo everything. The rangers had to act quickly, but there was no room for haste. The lion, though now stable, was still vulnerable, its strength drained from the trauma it had endured. Kneeling beside the lion, the man ran his fingers lightly over the creature's body, checking for any signs of further injury. The lion's fur was matted with blood, its muscles trembling with every slight movement, yet it made no attempt to rise. Exhausted and in pain, the animal lay still, allowing the rangers to tend to its wounds, but its body spoke of the toll the ordeal had taken. It was a fragile moment, one that could turn in an instant. Every breath the lion took was heavy with the weight of its recovery, and the man could feel the fragility of the situation with every passing second. The rangers had done well so far, but the real test would come as they moved the lion from the clearing to safety. The jungle, with its dense undergrowth and ever-present threats, was no place for an injured lion to remain. It was not just the terrain that was dangerous, it was the unpredictable nature of the wild. The male lion, still lingering at the edge of the clearing, remained a threat. Its presence was a reminder that the ranger's work was far from finished. Though it had shown no further aggression, perhaps recognizing the situation's gravity, the male lion's silent watch was a constant reminder that danger was never far in the jungle. Slowly, deliberately, The rangers began the process of moving the injured lion. Every movement had to be measured. The lion's fragile state required absolute care. One wrong jolt, one sudden shift could cause irreparable harm. The air felt thick with tension as they carefully lifted the lion, guiding its body in slow, calculated motions. Each ranger worked in unison, focused on the task at hand, their eyes constantly scanning the surroundings for any signs of danger. The jungle, ever watchful, was silent except for the rustling of leaves in the soft breeze. But beneath that calm was the knowledge that danger could strike at any moment. The man, still kneeling beside the lion, kept his hand lightly on the animal's side as they carefully maneuvered it into position. The lion's eyes, heavy with exhaustion, seemed to flicker in and out of consciousness, but there was a quiet trust in its demeanor, a silent recognition that the rangers were there to help. As they began their slow journey back through the jungle, the man kept his focus on the lion, his heart steady but full of quiet urgency. The journey ahead would be long, and the rangers knew the true test had only just begun. They had cleared the first hurdle, stabilizing the lion, but moving it into a safer area would be fraught with danger. The jungle was unpredictable, and every moment was fragile. The rangers continued to move with purpose, their every step calculated, their breaths held in quiet anticipation. They had come this far, but the real work was just beginning. The jungle seemed to close in around them, its dense foliage a reminder of the obstacles that still lay ahead. Yet, for now, the lion was safe in their care. The rangers, though cautious, moved with a quiet determination, knowing that every decision would shape the outcome. The lion's survival, still uncertain, depended on their ability to navigate the wild with care, patience, and respect for the fragile life they were protecting. As they moved deeper into the jungle, the air grew thicker with the weight of the journey, and the rangers pressed on, step by careful step. The journey had been long, the rangers guiding the injured lion through the dense jungle with careful hands and measured steps. Every movement had been deliberate, with an understanding of the weight the animal carried, not just physically, but in the quiet, invisible battle for survival it had faced. Though still weak and recovering, the lion's steps had begun to show more confidence as they neared the edges of the jungle. The thick canopy that had once enveloped them gradually gave way to the open savanna. Here, the land stretched wide, an endless horizon that beckoned with the promise of freedom, a vast space where the lion could reclaim its strength, away from the confines of injury and human intervention. The air seemed lighter here, the jungle's dense, humid air replaced by the openness of the plains. Each step the lion took seemed to signal its return to a life it had momentarily lost. Though still cautious, its movements had become more assured. The rangers paused for a moment, watching as the lion walked forward, its head held high despite the visible signs of its struggle. The once regal creature, its body marked by the trauma it had endured, now carried itself with a quiet dignity. The man, standing slightly back from the group, observed the animal's deliberate movements. There was no need to speak. There was nothing left to say. The care the lion had received, the trust that had been built in the days of healing, was evident in every step it now took. The bond between human and animal, though fleeting, had been made. It was a bond formed in the stillness of care, in the moments of quiet connection that spoke volumes without a single word. The lion's eyes briefly met the man's, a silent acknowledgement of the bond they shared. In those few seconds, there was no pain, no struggle, just the simple understanding that the lion was ready to return to the wild, where it truly belonged. The lion slowly turned its head back to the wide, open expanse of the savannah, its gaze steady as it surveyed the land before it. With measured steps, it began to walk further into the wild, its movements slow yet purposeful. The rangers watched silently, their hearts full of quiet gratitude. They had done what they could. They had guided the lion back to its home, and now it was time for the animal to continue its journey. It was a moment of stillness, a rare moment of peace in the often chaotic world of wildlife rescue. There was no dramatic farewell, no grand gestures, just the quiet act of a creature reclaiming its place in the world. The lion's tail flicked once, brushing the grass as it moved forward, and with that it was gone, swallowed by the savannah, its form becoming a part of the vast, endless landscape. The rangers stood still, letting the weight of the moment settle into their hearts. The sun, now beginning to dip low on the horizon, cast a soft, golden light across the savannah, turning the grasses to a warm amber. The light, the quiet wind, and the vast openness of the land seemed to hold the moment in its embrace. The lion was free again, no longer bound by the wounds of the past, but moving forward into the future. As the last of its form disappeared into the tall grasses, the rangers felt a deep sense of peace. It wasn't an end, but a quiet beginning for the lion. The jungle had not relinquished its wildness, but in this moment, the savannah had become a place of healing and hope. The rangers exhaled slowly, knowing that they had been part of something profound, something bigger than themselves. As the light faded and the last warmth of the day slipped beneath the horizon, the savannah returned to its quiet, unspoken rhythm. The rangers began to turn away, the weight of the moment still lingering in the air. There was no need for words, for the silent bond formed in the wild had already spoken. The lion's journey had been one of struggle, but now it was moving forward, stronger, healed, and free. And in that peace, the rangers carried with them the quiet gratitude that this moment, this brief connection, would stay with them forever. The wild had been restored, and the lion had returned to its rightful place, where it would continue to roam free.